Hello, everybody out there, all you beautiful people. Welcome to the Matadoras. Today, we are going to be talking about a pretty heavy topic that I'm sure has a lot of controversy attached to it. Nevertheless, both Lizzie and I have been very much a part of this type of abuse, and it is spiritual abuse. Spiritual abuse can be really confusing because I think you think of maybe a cult when you think of spiritual abuse. But it also can come into the relationship and be definitely a huge part of abuse in a relationship. And sometimes we don't recognize it as abuse because, maybe you're just someone who's a faith-based person, or you go to church, or you just have your, very beliefs that are near and dear to your heart. And we'll just kind of start with the definition of spiritual abuse according to ChatGPT. So this definition is that spiritual abuse refers to the misuse or manipulation of religious beliefs, practices, or doctrines to control, harm, or exploit individuals. It can occur within religious or spiritual contexts and is characterized by the misuse of power, authority, or influence to manipulate and control others for personal or group gain. So with that, I also want to say that we are definitely not church bashing, okay, or mosque, or, any kind of belief that you have. We are not bashing faith or belief in God or any of those things. Just like you can find very healthy friends and healthy spouses and healthy significant others, you can also find very, very healthy churches and places of worship. Also, you can find very unhealthy churches and places of worship. So we just want to make sure that you understand that we get that. And, Lizzie and I ended up in the unhealthy part. And so she's just going to tell a little bit about her story so that we can share this with you and hopefully shed some light and awareness on what this is. Thanks, Lizzie.
Oh, thank you, Deana. So I was married 2 times. Hopefully by now, most of you know that if you're listening to us, Deana and I were both married to the same person, but not at the same time. Her first husband was my second husband. So my first marriage went through a lot of spiritual and emotional abuse. And of course, it happened at a time where we really weren't educated at all. We were kind of like, if we were going through a hard time, we would go to the church. I know Deana and I both experienced this, and we were told, what are you doing? What can you do? What can you change to help them as they are trying to process this? Because both of our husbands had the ability to kind of know the right words to say, the right way to be remorseful, the right way to use the words that they may want to hear, thinking that they are really wanting to make these changes. And truthfully, it was very damaging. So, a lot of times, I think both Deana and I, when we would be in these situations, when you come out of some of those conversations, it's like you're re victimized by church leaders. Now, I will say that I don't, I would like to think that many of them just were not educated because you can't see what's going on in the house. But that's only like a little small, minute detail of the whole picture. But I will say one of the stories that I had, and I will share the rest of it in our podcast on spiritual abuse. One time when I went to the hospital, when I was pregnant with my oldest, I had appendicitis. And during the process, my husband said that it was because I was not obedient to God. And even during my recovery, he would continue to belittle me, tell me that I was reaping God's wrath. And because I couldn't drive, I felt vulnerable. And he gloried in having that kind of control over me. And the whole time I was recovering, I was miserable. And then to top it off, it came to light that he was cheating on me. And that was the first time I had left this marriage. So that is just like one story of a whole story. So,
So 14 years with this
yes,
man who was posing as a spiritual authority, not only within the context of the community that you lived in, but also in your relationship with him. He was making sure that you understood that he was in spiritual authority over you and the
correct.
children.
Yes,
And therefore, it gave him tremendous power and ability to do almost anything he wanted and to accuse you of never living up to what you were supposed to be in the relationship, right?
right. Yeah. And it's almost an impossible thing to live up to. And a lot of people, one thing that I hear that they hear when they're going through spiritual abuse, religious abuse, is you need to submit.
Mm,
And that word in a biblical context mean a lot to a lot of different people. But nowhere in the Bible does it say that we need to submit to that type of sin, that type of abuse, treatment. Because if you look in the Bible, especially the New Testament, it's about loving your neighbor. It's about being kind and things like that. Not how much destruction, how much control can you have over another person? And to me, when I hear control or submit, it just means control. It's
hmm.
how they want to control you
Yeah.
because they're taking your core beliefs and values and they're using that to manipulate you, to put you
Hmm.
under their thumb.
I
Eh,
agree
Yeah,
100%. I cringe when I hear that word. And I know that, in the right context, if you're with a wonderful man who adores you, or you're with a wonderful woman who adores you, in the right context, that mutual submission is more like you adore that person and you want to make them happy and you will basically do anything to make them happy because they make you so happy, and there's just this perfect love, respect, mutual submission, quote unquote. But
correct.
I tell you what, I think that this word has gotten so out of hand and so misused and so twisted, unfortunately, in a lot of context. And when it becomes submitting to an abusive person and having to deal with harm, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, financial, you name it, it takes on a whole different spin and it becomes terrible and wrong. So, in our podcast, which is on Spotify and Google, iHeart and Apple, under the Matadoras, we will be telling the entire story of Lizzie's marriage to this spiritual abuser and what it was like for her. And I hope that it'll help somebody out there to understand that there is a component of spirituality, unfortunately, that can be wielded incorrectly and
Mm-hmm.
used as a weapon.
There are a couple of books Dina and I would highly recommend. One of them is Enough is Enough by David E. Clark. He gives you really great, especially if you're a person of faith. He gives you great biblical principles to back up, these abusers and to back up the steps that you need to make to be healthy. Nowhere in this book does he say you need to divorce. It's more like you need to watch out for this. You need to do it right to hopefully save your marriage. So I would highly recommend that is a book you read, or if you want to try to figure all this stuff out, it's just a great place to start. For those of you that are going through spiritual abuse, or someone that is, a great book to read is It Me? Making Sense of Our Confusing Marriage, a Christian Woman's Guide to Hidden Emotional and Spiritual Abuse by Natalie Hoffman. That book is phenomenal. And I would say that if there was any book that related to me and my past and my story, this was the book. And she gives some good things to go, okay, I am not alone in this situation. And there are so many out there that are in these situations. So I highly recommend those two books. So please check them out. And yeah, hopefully they'll give you some help and guidance.
Absolutely. And you know what? Can I just say, whether you out there listening are a believer or not a believer, or a faith based person or an atheist, or somewhere in between, we want you here. We are not trying to form some little exclusive club, only for faith-based people. We want you here. And we do feel
Exactly.
like the material is applicable to anybody. The faith-based portion just happens to be our story, but we want you here no matter what. And we feel that we have material that can help you no matter where you are in your journey.
Absolutely. And thank you for taking the time to stop by and check us out. Remember to subscribe to our page, like us, go to thematadoras.com. And also, as Deana said, look under the Matadoras on Apple, Spotify, Google, and iHeartRadio. And we appreciate your support and know that we care about each and every one of you. Thank you.